And we're live.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Can you hear that?
I can. I don't know if the people can.
I think the people can.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning. My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And then we allow freedom ring. When we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of...
You cut him off, man.
Oh, I didn't mean to. I just hit mute on my end.
That was probably
'Cause,
Kate thinking his monologue's too long.
you know,
President Anderson.
we're live. And it is Monday, the 19th of January, year of our Lord 2026. It is 8:07 a.m. And if that signifies that we're late, it's because, Martin Luther King went on with the monologue too long, and I'm sure Kate will have words with him.
She'll send him an email.
She'll send
She'll send
Ralph
Coretta
Abernathy an email complaining about him.
She'll send Coretta.
Yeah.
We're just joking with you, Kate. We love you, Kate.
So, folks, it's Martin Luther King Day, and I'm not going to monologue because I am an arrogant bastard, but not so arrogant that I think I can talk after that. Folks.
Well, the cactus can.
Exactly. The cactus is
They're very arrogant.
Is very arrogant. So look, the sun is shining. The birds are chirping. It's going to be a great fucking day.
You're watching Dog Shirt TV, a forking revolution in morning television.
You are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a forking revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that when we play the I Have a Dream speech, we don't play a snippet of it. We play the whole thing, all 6 minutes and 46 seconds of it, except that I accidentally cut off the end by muting myself. And another one of the revolutionary features is that when we observe Martin Luther King Day, we do it by bringing texts to listen to talk about, and we do a full hour of discussions of the political speeches, the philosophy of, the theology of Martin Luther King. We do this thing seriously, all of which is a 9-minute long way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to take Martin Luther King Day seriously in the spirit in which it was meant to be observed. So, Holly, get us started. What text did you bring? And members of the Greek chorus, if you brought any texts to discuss or have any particular favorite Martin Luther King Day speeches, we will just pop up on screen. And yes, John Hawkinson, we will be reserving the last few minutes of the show for Holly's video, uh, it- as well as a brief update on batteries, several of which have been acquired while you guys were sleeping. So, Holly.
Yeah. So as I told Ben over the weekend, we were talking about Martin Luther King. I grew up in the white evangelical tradition, and the main thing I knew about Martin Luther King is that, yeah, he did civil rights, blah 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 blah, but also he had a lot of affairs and he was very immoral, and that tells you all you need to know about the white evangelical tradition. um, Sign that your religious tradition is probably a little bit racist is you are more focused on Martin Luther King's infidelities, which are real, and you are not focused on the many pastors who continue to abuse women and children and some men in your own churches. That's a sign that you might be a racist religious tradition. Just a hint. Um, so as a progressive Christian, I have really enjoyed actually reading his sermons. He is an amazing Christian theologian. The depth of his analysis and the integrity of, I think, communicating the ethics of Christ is really powerful. Not just him, but other Black theologians from a similar tradition. I just get to a place of Christian ethic that, again, I was not raised with, because I was raised in a tradition where Christian ethics basically boiled down to fighting abortion, condemning gay people, not having sex outside of marriage, and voting Republican. And that's just really not very inspiring, and not very accurate and true to the actual teachings of Jesus, who didn't talk about abortion, never talked about gay people. I don't think he even talked about sex at all. He did talk a lot about justice. He talked a lot about the feeding the poor and standing up for the oppressed. He talked a lot about he bucked a lot of authority. And the Black tradition in America has certainly captured that element of it. So my passages, and I find his sermons really convicting, because the extent to which he exemplified loving one's enemies and forgiveness and grace and all of those things is really humbling and convicting. So I'm just going to read a little bit from a sermon. Again, everything I've got is from sermons that I don't think there's recordings of. But he was a prolific preacher throughout his life. From a sermon on loving your enemies. So I'll have to bear with me as I
Do we
skip
know when
through.
this is from?
I'll look it up, and I don't want to lose my place, but I'll look it up later. I think it's definitely from the 60s, in the thick of the civil rights movement, because he makes
Okay.
reference to things. So it's not from earlier. Okay, so far from being the pious injunction of a utopian dreamer, the command to love one's enemies is an absolute necessity for our survival. Love, even for enemies, is the key to the solution of the problems of our world. Jesus is not an impractical idealist. He is the practical realist. And then he goes on to discuss how you love one's enemies, sort of some of the practicalities. And then I'm going to read another bit of this that that is probably more famous. Okay. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate. violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, he is setting forth a profound and ultimately inescapable admonition. Have we not come to such an impasse in the modern world that we must love our enemies, or else the chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars, must be broken, or we will be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. And that is absolutely true, and I've seen it really clearly in in the African context, where conflicts just seem unending, and when this group gets power, they take revenge on the other group and vice versa, and it just goes on and on and on. And what you need is a leader and a force and a movement that breaks that cycle. And that's exactly what Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement did here in our country. That's what Mandela and Bishop Tutu did in South Africa, is they broke the cycle, and in doing so, they rescued their nation from the abyss. I mean, I think I've said before on the show in talking about the civil rights, imagine if African Americans had decided they were going to mount an insurgency, and they were going to take up arms and, respond with violence. And, according to just eye for an eye, I mean, they'd be morally justified in a way. I mean, because of the wrongs committed to them. But the fact that they chose nonviolence, it broke the cycle, and it gave us a chance as a nation. I know it doesn't seem that way now, because we're in another cycle of violence, I believe. But that was a pivotal moment and a pivotal decision in American history, and it was incredibly disciplined. Yes, they did extensive training for every single person that did the freedom rides and the lunch sit-ins. They did role playing, and in which they would be humiliated and even roughed up a little bit by the role players to get them used to accepting violence, so they would not respond in their natural fight or flight instinct. Um, they did extensive training, and it was an incredibly, incredibly disciplined movement, which is amazing to think about in the days before, easy communications, internet, email, all of those things. To have a huge movement that was disciplined, I think it did help, again, that the Black church is such an important institution, and and a Christian ethic was already well ingrained, um, as something that people valued. And so when you have leaders like King, who are pastors and theologians and can connect what is needed to be done to this deeper Christian ethic, I think it was a powerful motivator for people.
All right,
And
but help me out with something here. I totally accept all of this as a tactical and strategic judgment,
absolutely.
but my Jewish soul does not bond with the concept of loving my enemy.
But I think
Um,
you do, Ben. I think you do. I think
uh,
it's not just a Christian ethic. I think it's a broader ethic. You certainly
oh,
act like it.
I don't feel love for,
It's not a feeling.
um,
In fact, he has a
I
passage about
I
that.
accept that um, a certain, uh, tactical set of behaviors is I believe in nonviolence, but the but I don't experience it as anything like love. In fact, I have a if you ask me about my attitude toward my enemies, um, I will not deny violent fantasies.
Sure.
I will not deny, uh, you know, um, uh, having a enormous amount of anger and rage and feelings of hatred, the opposite of love.
Okay, but
And I have this, there's something about the command not merely to tolerate, not merely um, to be pacific, not merely to refrain from violence, but to love, which I chafe at. And
we all
I'm
chafe at it. We all chafe at it. Okay, let me read what Dr. King has to say to you. Um, okay, so he talks about the kind of love he's talking about. There's different kinds of love. And he says the third type of love, agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men, an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Agape is the love of God operating in the human heart. At this level, we love men not because, or mankind, not because we like them, nor even because their ways appeal to us, nor even because they possess some type of divine spark. We love every man because God loves him. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed that he does. Now we can see what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. We should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies. It is impossible to like some people. Like is a sentimental and affectionate word. How can we be affectionate towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush our very being and place innumerable stumbling blocks in our path? How can we like a person who is threatening our children and bombing our homes? That is impossible. But Jesus recognized that love is greater than like. When Jesus bids us to love our enemies, he is speaking neither of eros or philia. He is speaking of agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. Only by following this way and responding with this type of love are we able to be children of our Father who is in heaven. So he's not talking about, it's not a love like a feeling. Your feelings could actually be not love at all. It's love in terms of what you're putting out in the world. For instance, I
This is a
think
very Hellenistic view of Jesus, of course, because these distinctions between Greek words, I don't think, and I don't know if we have any Aramaic speakers here, but I'm not sure these had parallels in the
well,
Aramaic
I don't know.
vernacular
No.
that
I
Jesus
know
spoke.
a lot of theology and a lot of the early scriptures that people study are in Greek. So,
Yes,
um
no, they're all in Greek, but
yeah,
that's, of course, not the language that he spoke.
sure. But
But
we have
I'm
no
just
internet.
being churlish.
So if I can continue,
Yes.
yeah, so he's not talking about a feeling, he's not talking about, so for instance, Ben, you would say probably let's see, you probably, I don't know, who's someone that you hate?
Well, I choose not to ventilate my
Okay.
hatreds in
Okay.
public,
Well, there you go.
but
That's another, that's a choice that you're making.
but it is a choice, but it has nothing to do with my feelings toward the individuals. But let's just say, um, I I I struggle with when thinking about Stephen Miller to hate the sin and love the sinner.
Sure, and actually, I kinda hate that phrase because I grew up with that, and that was a reason why we could be mean to gay people, is because we loved them, but we hated their sin so much, and we wanted them delivered from their sin. I think a big difference is that gay people weren't hurting anyone, and some of the people whose sin we are condemning now are actively hurting people. I think that's a big, difference
Yeah,
in how I was
look,
raised.
let's take the malefactor in chief himself, and just say this stretches my capacity for goodwill, and I accept that the that MLK would say, okay, you don't have to like him, but love him. But I still struggle with, okay, what does that mean? What's the difference between my reaction to him, which is something like hatred and something like um uh uh I want to minimize the damage that he does. I do not wish him well. I revile his works, and I choose to work with him only on that set of things that I independently think are in the interests of the nation.
Yeah.
Right. And what's the difference between that set of feelings and the kind of love that MLK would want me to extend to him? And if there isn't really any, then isn't it just rhetoric?
No, because again, it's translated into tactical decisions. And you know, I mean, our system of law, I think, is based on it's based on justice, but it's also well, I'm against the death penalty. I guess people who are for the death penalty, that is an unredemptive kind of justice where there's no capacity for change. I think what King would say, and I think I've heard other civil rights and Black preachers say, um, one of the key things is that you hope for their change, and you make allowances for their repentance. Now, in Donald Trump's case, I almost certainly that will never happen, and a lot of these people, but you don't like if it did happen, you would respond with grace, and you would allow for change and repentance. That's one of the things you would allow for. Also, another thing he talks about in this sermon is what lives in your own heart in terms of how corrosive it becomes to yourself. You may intensely dislike these people, but it doesn't eat you inside. You instead turn it into um, some greater mission to improve the world.
Okay, so this I totally buy, and I have, let me be just frank about this, a certain amount of contempt for people whose idea of expression of the emotion that I feel is limited to yapping on Twitter and sort of sending snarky, um that if all you can make of your emotional response is, you know sort of teenage rage, that's not good enough. And so if part of the point of love is turn it into something useful,
I mean, that's what he did for
I
sure.
have a lot of that I have a lot of time and energy for. um I also agree with you and everybody who is saying in the chat that turning it into discipline in a movement is something awesome. And of course, that he got from Gandhi. Um,
Well, Gandhi got it from Jesus. I mean, to be honest. I mean,
I mean, there's a good
they both got
lineage
it from
here.
Jesus. So,
Um, but I mean, um, so but the idea that you translate that love into a tolerance for accepting abuse by way of making a point, that is a radical proposition and a fascinating one, which I am quite in awe of, frankly.
I think you have to understand also, and John asked, and I do want to come back to it. So stick a pin in. Surely there were nonviolent leaders in the Jewish church. Let's stick a pin in that, and let me finish my point, please. Um, I think you have to understand the original context of Jesus or whoever these early, and I don't think Jesus was the only one. I think there's a lot of similar ideas in Rumi, who I think was earlier, certainly in Buddhism. But I mean, the sort of base human condition and way back in time, societies were built on tribal hate, basically. Tribal
Right.
hate and suspicion, where you have your tribe, that's your group. You don't trust or like any other group. You respond to them with violence and barbarity. You defend your tribe. Okay, so that was certainly the you see that really clearly in the Jewish scripture, what we call the Old Testament. You see that really clearly in, at various points there's orders to genocide an entire people, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the context.
Amalek.
Now,
We get them.
as humanity, we have obviously evolved beyond that point, and this is the power. This is why this type of thinking has been so revolutionary. It's actually over thousands of years, it's translated into, um, an entire different way of government and society and understanding ourselves as human beings. And we have pluralistic democracy is a formalization of this ethic. And so Jesus and other thinkers way back when, they're breaking through that tribal noise with this message. And it really was revolutionary. And it started a process of humanity coming to a place. So I think we don't because our sort of our whole society is based on some measure of grace and love as a pluralistic democracy, or it has been, not always, but it has been at various points, or it's aspired to that. We should aspire to that. Then I don't think it like has the revolutionary ring, but when you have a movement like this, where again, just based on pure justice, they could say, you know what, the laws of the United States are immoral, and and that includes, we've been murdered by the thousands for centuries now. We're gonna eye for an eye, and it would destroy, our entire society. So it is very powerful. It is not a sentiment. The other thing for me, I will say because I wrestle with this a lot, because I do, like, Christianity is very important to me. And that's what I've chosen as a foundational, ethic, for my life. And so I really like the parody video. Like, I really wrestled with that. Like, that's not really loving, is it? It's calling people out, but it's kind of, it's saying that they're collaborating with Satan, which I think is actually true. Actually, I didn't say they were Satan. I think that's a qualitative difference. But whenever I do these like kind of crazy things like that, I do wrestle with it. What does it mean to love? To me, it also means that you imagine, like, on a certain level, first of all, I have compassion definitely on certain level for these ICE people, many of whom are really not good people, but still, some of them are probably not. Human beings are complicated, and there's probably not every ICE officer is a purely evil person, and the government is putting them in horrible positions and having them do horrible things that is damaging their souls and even putting their own bodies in danger. So I can say what they're doing is wrong, and I can still find some compassion for them. I have compassion, honestly, for Donald Trump, because I think something is deeply wrong in his brain. I think he's incapable of normal human relationship, and always has been. And I feel bad for him. I think that is horrible. We're reaping the consequences of that tragedy on a national and international level. But it's also a personal tragedy that someone would be so broken and incapable of normal human relationship. And then finally, I will say, with regards to the actual people in my life, I just try to remember, and frankly, I'm not going to lie, like, I have to like regularly beat down the anger and even the hatred for people I know who are empowering this. And I just try to remember, they're they have various it depends on the person, of course, but they've been brainwashed in different ways, and their capacity to understand is limited in different ways, and I try to find some compassion. It doesn't mean that they're excused at all, but I just try to find some. I think what he's or wanting us to do is to just find some element of common humanity, and then lastly, it's a humility that given different circumstances, like I'm capable of bad things. Like if I completely gave into my hate here and all of my feelings, I could go do some really vile things out there. Um, if, I'm not going to do that, not only just for the consequences, because it's wrong and it's not helpful. If I go out there and shoot an ICE agent, like that is not helpful. That just makes the problem bigger for the good guys. So to me, that's a lot of what he's talking about and the context of what he's talking about. But it's definitely not a feeling. It's definitely not a feeling.
Interesting.
It's almost an overriding. It's a conscious overriding of your feelings is what it is.
So,
Sorry, I
in
went on and on.
answer to the various questions about whether there is a nonviolent tradition in Judaism, the answer basically is no. The Jewish tradition goes from a tradition of sovereignty in the pre Roman era, which is uh, um, sometimes a tradition of conquest, sometimes a tradition of but it is a tradition of its closest. I think the best way to understand it is kind of like the Muslim tradition, right, where there's no line between the secular law of the way you conduct yourself in the law of the way you conduct yourself in day-to-day life and the sort of state law, that's just all one law. Jews kind of give up on the idea of sovereignty after the Bar Kokhba revolt is causes the exile in 135 CE, and the entire sovereign enterprise gets kind of put on the shelf until the coming of the Messiah. So that stuff is still studied, it's still learned, but it's not until the advent of Zionism, it is not a part of uh, day-to-day Jewish life. And so Jewish life becomes a matter of submission to secular authority and becomes a communal governance thing, but it doesn't have any aspirations to run a state.
Well, neither does Christianity, actually. I mean,
Well,
in
sure
fact,
it
all this Christian
does.
nationalism is in violation of Jesus's.
No, but there is the whole Pope appoints,
But that came
Pope.
after. I'm talking about the teachings of Jesus. I'm
Right.
not talking about
but
Christendom.
But early by the 3rd century, Christianity is a state religion.
I would say that's actually a violation of Christianity. That's Christendom. That's Christendom.
Okay,
Constantine converted, and that's the beginning of, honestly,
spoken
the problem.
like a Protestant.
Well, I mean, it becomes a problem because it puts this new faith, relatively new faith, in a context that is basically antithetical to the foundational teachings.
Right, but okay, but we have like 1800 years in which Christians as such are purporting to rule countries.
Sure, and
so violence gets baked into, because there are things like crusades, there are religious wars, right? Jews are outside of all of that because they don't run any countries. And so that aspect of violence is, for 2,000 years, really outside the Jewish tradition. as such, there's no developed thought about, I mean, really the thought is, when is it appropriate to use violence for, state purposes in resisting the state? And these are questions that are very theoretical for Jews for a very long
Well,
time.
except that
Or
Jesus was a Jew and operating in a very Jewish context, and responding to an oppression of the Jewish people.
right.
So
So, but that's before the Bar Kokhba revolt. So the the destruction of the temple, which is 30 years after the crucifixion, 35 years after the crucifixion, is sort of the last, well, the second to last great revolt, and then 75 years later, there's another one, and at that point, this is when Jews kind of give up on sovereignty.
people are getting impatient. They want to read their MLK
Okay,
things.
that's the answer to John's question, and of course, all of that is interrupted by the advent of Zionism. Um, all right. What is next on our agenda?
Well, who wants to come on and give their quotes?
I have
Because I have more. I can read.
I have
go
another
through.
one as well. So this one is Martin Luther.
Does anyone want to come on? First of all, your last going once, going twice. Okay,
All
Ben,
right.
go.
All right. So this is Martin Luther King's last speech, and it's actually just the last 3 minutes of the speech. I do encourage people to listen to the whole speech, but it's like 45 minutes. So this is the night before um, uh, he was killed. And this was a speech in Memphis that he gave. I believe it was in connection with the uh, it was in connection with a sanitation workers strike in Memphis.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. And so just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
There you go.
Very prescient. Of course, he was basically made his peace with being killed in the really in the 50s. I think that was the first time his house was some a bomb was like thrown in his house. Um so he had lived with death for a long time.
Yeah, but that one's I first heard that speech when I was uh probably 30 years ago now, and I have always thought that there was a weird premonition
Oh
quality
yeah.
to it, because the reference that he's making is to
Moses.
Moses's death. Moses is allowed onto the it's actually one of the last passages of the Hebrew Bible, or the Torah. He's allowed onto the mountaintop, and he's allowed to look uh into Israel, but not to cross with the people, and he dies on the mountaintop as Joshua leads the people into Israel. And first of all, of course, to his audience, that none of that requires any explanation, because this is a highly biblically literate audience. But he does seem to be saying, I may not get there with you. And I've always wondered what he knew or what he suspected, and why that speech then. It was literally the night before he was assassinated.
It's one of those spooky moments. There's a lot of those in history. I don't know if he knew anything specific, of course, but I mean, I think he knew all the time that he could, very easily be killed. And I think Carol asked about another speech. There is another speech earlier, basically where he talks about, or an interview that he gave where he talks about like, hey, look, I have to be prepared to die. Like I can't control that. And if you're afraid to die, you won't do what is needed. Like you have to somehow override that paralyzing fear that we all have.
And people forget this about him because he's such a figure with the exception of your former community, he's such a figure of universal admiration now. But he was, in 1968, a highly, highly controversial figure. This was not, mostly actually not because of domestic stuff, mostly because of the Vietnam War, that he was ferociously opposed to the Vietnam War and had made some speeches that sounded sympathetic to Ho Chi Minh. And so this was part of where he was a communist thing. I forget the context of the speech, but he gave a speech in which he uh, tried to look at the war from Ho Chi Minh's point of view, and the refrain was, well, maybe he has a sense of humor, maybe, and that was really badly received by a lot of people, including people who had been allies in the context of certain civil rights struggles. And so he was at a low ebb of his popularity. Had alienated, rightly or wrongly, I'm not, a lot of white allies were not, I mean, still respected him, but he was not the figure that he was by the
Agree.
time he was sort of secularly canonized,
Or
in
that he was
the
earlier.
early 80s.
I'd say 63, this March on Washington is probably the high point. He was also by 68 increasingly being criticized and challenged, within the Black community and the civil rights movement. There was, of course, earlier there was Malcolm X who challenged him from a more militant standpoint, but then Malcolm X was killed. But by 68, of course, you've got the Black Panthers and some of the other more militant. Even SNCC had turned
Right.
into a more militant organization, and so a lot of people were becoming impatient with his tactics and his message. So.
All right. Next, do you have more text?
I always have more text. I have a whole book of sermons that's highlighted on my Kindle. Does anyone else have anything? Um, but oh, so like if you some good reading, by the way, Taylor Branch has written, I think, is it 2 or 3? I think it's 2 large volumes on the civil
Yes.
rights movement that are really, really good. Parting the Waters and Pillar of Fire, I believe. There's 2, yeah. And those are really good things to read if you but also just again recommend, especially if you are from a Christian tradition, you know, his sermons are very convicting and really get to the heart of what our faith is supposedly about.
And if you're interested in the assassination, the book Killing the Dream by Gerald Posner is quite good, and involves a great deal of archival research that was um, uh, at least state of the art when the book came out. I forget when that was, but it's very good. Um,
All right, I'm gonna read a passage that is of of a particular interest to me, but I think it's given my background, but I think it's there's some lessons there for all of us. Okay. Let's see. A true altruism is more than the capacity to pity, it is the capacity to sympathize. Pity may represent little more than the impersonal concern which prompts the mailing of a check, but true sympathy is the personal concern which demands the giving of one's soul. Pity may arise from interest in an abstraction called humanity, but sympathy grows out of a concern for a particular needy human being who lies at life's roadside. Sympathy is fellow feeling for the person in need, his pain, agony, and burdens. Our missionary efforts fail when they are based on pity rather than true compassion. Instead of doing, I love this. This is so precious. This is decades before this actually became ever spoken in white evangelical circles. Instead of seeking to do something with the African and Asian peoples, we have too often sought to do something for them. An expression of pity devoid of genuine sympathy leads to a new form of paternalism which no self-respecting person can accept. Dollars possess the potential for helping wounded children of God on life's Jericho road, but unless those dollars are distributed by compassionate fingers, they will enrich neither the giver nor the receiver. Millions of missionary dollars have gone to Africa from the hands of church people who would die a million deaths before they would permit a single African the privilege of worshiping in their congregation.
ouch.
So I kind of love that because it's true.
Because it's the history of your life.
It is, and it's brutally honest. So, and it gets to a point that again, everything has a relevance. I think whether we're in this sort of cataclysmic moral struggle, which I think we are now, or just in normal life, it gets to the question of how do you help people without condescending to them? You know, there are clearly inequalities in the world. There are clearly people in need, and there are clearly people who have resources to help them. And I believe we should help people, but how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that bestows dignity and is not condescending? And that is something I wrestle with all the time because of how I was raised and seeing kind of the white saviorism and the sort of heroism involved. So it's something I ask myself all the time, and I honestly don't have a great answer. So
Well, speaking of, oops, I shared the wrong
speaking of
screen.
heroism,
Yeah, I was going to say,
heroes make videos.
speaking of things that we are ways to show sympathy with people and identify with them without being condescending. Here is Holly's masterpiece.
And Ben's.
All right, stop. Collaborate with Satan. ISIS back with some brand new henchmen. Someone they've got a hold of tightly, roaming our hoods both daily and nightly. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Put on a costume and let's go to the extreme. The chopper in like seals, storming the target like a battlefield. Deadly, cause their boss has immunity. It's only noon and they've done 10 felonies. Christy thinks she looks like fire. Got enough collagen to fill a tire. Fierce in a gulag, she's all cosplay. She claims law's got nothing to say. If there's no problem, yo, they'll make it. Check out the case while they blame it on immigrants. Ice, bootlicks. Fascistic ice, bootlicks. Ice, bootlicks. Fascistic ice, bootlicks. Now the blue cities are angry. Wine moms out here doing surveillance, rolling by in their Honda Pilot, scaring the tough guys just by smiling. Bad boys masked up like bandits, pounding Americans all on camera. Detaining a vet trying to get to work. They're on a roll. It's time to break windows. Roll in a disabled lady asking another if she's Somali. The boomers on standby waving just to say hi. They don't stop. Tear gas flies. Keep on pursuing fake terrorists. Take it down pastoring clericals. They got a quota, so they continue to. Kids at play. Let's go to preschool. Hauling out a dangerous teacher. She's got a passport if she can reach it. Uber driver looks suspiciously swarthy. They doubt he was born in this country. Now they got a Chinese grandma. She's been here since the Bush era. They're all ready for a wider nation. No more cats and dogs for the Haitians. Tweeting out a Nazi shit show. Even Miller's got to get off somehow. Dropping Bible verses like they own them. Cross necklace covers all the lion. Chrissy's up to bat. She's in a cowboy hat. She got a refresh, gotta hide the aftermath. If there's no problem, yo, they'll make one. Check out her hair while they flout the Constitution. Ice, bootlicks. Fascistic ice, bootlicks. Ice, bootlicks. Fascistic ice, bootlicks. Word to the founders. Come get your kid.
I just want to say one thing to everybody in the Greek chorus, which is, it is Friday. If you ask me to dance, the answer is no.
He's a very bad dancer, I'll have to say. He's a uniquely bad dancer.
The answer is no. I dance for
Holly only.
Or for Holly only.
Also,
Folks,
I want to say to everyone, including Ben Wittes, please tweet it out. I'm not on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, tweet it out.
I'm not on Twitter either.
Post it out. Post it on all your socials. Get the word out. Ben Wittes, send it to Tim Miller, please. I cannot get his attention. He is too big for me, but he is. You're big enough for him. You've been on his show. Get it to Tim Miller. Tell him that I sent you. I
will send it to Tim Miller. I have shared it on Instagram. I will put it in today's dog shirt. And we're going to get this circulating. Send it to everybody you've ever met. Folks, we're going to wrap. and we're going to be back tomorrow. I have no idea who the co-hosts
Oh,
are going to be.
it's gonna be me
Oh,
because my friend
oh,
Mike
that's
is
right.
coming
We have a
on.
guest tomorrow.
Yeah,
Holly,
you're
tell
gonna
us
love
about our
him.
guest.
Micah, his name is Micah. He is based in Chicago, but honestly, he is a roving professional protester. And his
Awesome.
costume is amazing. Wait till you see his costume and some of his photos. It is amazing, and it is very weather inappropriate for winter, and yet he's still out there, which I want to know the logistics of this. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
All
And
right,
then
we're
he's
gonna
gonna inspire
tomorrow.
you.
It's Micah Day. All right, you guys wanted a battery update. We're gonna do that before we close. Go a minute over. I woke up this morning and found that $4,000 more had shown up in my Venmo account overnight. There is a hitch in getting money out of my Venmo account because Venmo puts a weekly limit on cash transfers out of the account. And I am over that limit. So there is a snag here that I'm working on that just is going to take a couple days to, I have $12,000 in my Venmo account and I can't get any of it out for a few more days. We have $20,000 that is on its way to Nastia. A friend in Kiev has advanced us 10,000 of that, so we could spend it, and then we will um, reimburse her as soon as that money comes in. With that money, Nastia bought 3 more batteries today and thereby exhausted the number of batteries available for sale by the manufacturer in Kiev until March. So we are now working to try to get batteries through resellers, and we may actually do an importation of batteries ourselves. We're trying to figure that out. In addition, since I am going there in a week, I don't want to advertise my plans, but I may carry uh, uh, some funds in cash as well. If you're planning to rob me, don't think about it. So we are moving expeditiously to get money into the country and to secure batteries, of which we have now secured 5, and to distribute them. That is the update. I will every day or so, I'm not promising to do it every day, keep an update of that table that I made, those statistics that I posted yesterday. I've made a little spreadsheet and I will keep updating those numbers every few days. Folks, we're going to be back. It's going to be tomorrow that we're going to have Micah here. It's going to be awesome.